The 9/11 Tribute Center. How did the idea come, and how did it start?
So the idea for the 9/11 Tribute Center came primarily from a group of high school students that came here in 2004 from Phillipsburg, Kansas, and met with our board president, Lee Ielby. And they discussed sort of his connection to September 11th, visiting the World Trade Center site, and Lee explained what happened in the recovery at the World Trade Center site, the loss of his son, and for students coming here that had no connection to September 11th, it was an incredibly meaningful experience for them to have a chance to ask questions and understand the historical relevance of the World Trade Center site, and to be able to take home something more than just sort of looking at a construction site or an unfinished sort of public place. So it was an important pivotal point at which we saw that exchange and felt that that was an important program that we could provide.
Okay. The mission of the Tribute Center. You guys go about touring and your exhibit. What is like the mission, the core mission of the organization itself?
So the evolution of the mission for the September 11 Families Association is to support the 9/11 community, including family members who lost a loved one on 9/11, survivors who either worked in the tower or lived in the area, residents, and recovery workers, police, fire, construction workers, volunteers that came down in the aftermath to actually help this area to rebuild and recover. So our mission is to support the 9/11 community, victims of terrorism, and then also building upon that, they have provided sort of a personal basis to create a public education program, learning about the events that they went through from a first-hand perspective. So public education is sort of the secondary side of what we're now able to do through the Tribute Center, having a public presence here in New York, across the World Trade Center site, and exhibitions that actually teach about the history of what happened, and also connecting to the personal aspect of what people actually went through.
Can you explain a little bit about the docents and the role with the Tribute Center?
Sure. So the docent program started in 2005, and it was a program to train everyday regular folks that had lived through the events of September 11th or were victims of the actual attack to be able to constructively tell their stories in basically a 5-point walking tour following the exhibitions of the Tribute Center. So it's not therapy, but it's a form of therapy of being able to share their stories, sort of creates a desensitization of the trauma that they actually went through by being able to share with people what they went through. And when we train them how to tell their stories into a condensed version, it sort of boils it down to the main part of their experience, which is a pretty tough thing for people to be able to do. But we've been very successful at working with people, and they're part of the program for their own reasons of wanting to remember someone, or the loss of a colleague, or being able to survive that day. So it's become a really constructive part of being able to convey the personal aspects of what happened to these folks during September 11th. And it's also an incredibly meaningful way to convey history. It goes back to the art of storytelling, which is sort of one of the most primitive forms of passing history down, but it's also the most impactful.
Education is huge here. Can you explain the educational program for students as well as people that come to the Tribute Center as well?
Sure. So the education program here at the Tribute Center has expanded greatly since we first started. When we initially started, it was primarily public education, anybody that walked in the door. But we're now seeing constituents of middle school and high school children that, being 12 years removed from the event, have very little understanding of what happened, if at all. It's a very, very difficult, traumatic subject that our generation is still struggling with how to handle. So being able to constructively create a teaching program where teachers can have lessons to actually share with their students, and understanding, even though there are political and religious complications to this very difficult subject, that you can approach it and inspire students to learn about it, why we said we would never forget in the aftermath of 9/11, remembering February 26, 1993 as the first attack on the World Trade Center. You know, these are important lessons, and unfortunately the mistakes that were made after 93, where security measures and things that unfortunately led up to 2001, how can we prevent this or anything else like it from ever happening again, is a really important component for whether it is students that may know little or nothing about September 11th when they come here, or for first responders, for military, for Homeland Security training programs, or for everyday people. We had a recent talk from the Department of Homeland Security, and the number one thing that they said was during a disaster, it's your neighbors that actually usually save or respond to help people rather than first responders. So just public education in general, as far as disasters, is a really important component that by telling the personal stories of what people went through, it provokes people to start to understand if this happened in their community, what would they do? And it's also ties back to one of the number one findings of the 9/11 Commission report, which was that we really never imagined this would ever happen. And so it's one of the things going forward, it gives people an opportunity to actually think about how would they react in this situation. By understanding more of the events of what happened, and also the components of what sorry, I lost my train of thought, but what happened in the aftermath of the events. So, do you want me to repeat the last part of that, or?
No, it's okay. It's
Okay, you'll do some editing?
Yeah.
Good.
No, it's perfectly fine.
Make me look good, Randall.
I will. No,
Okay.
you're perfectly fine, trust me.
Good.
The internship has been going on for 7 years now, I believe. How did that start?
So, Professor Dillon, the ambitious Professor Dillon, decided that after coming here and interviewing Lee and working with us on some journalism aspects, that allowing students to be able to come here and work with us here at the Tribute Center would give them an opportunity not only to have a hands-on real-life experience with journalism and reporting, as 9/11 was probably the most documented tragedy or incident probably in U.S. history, as has continued to stay relevant in the news and in other situations. So I think he saw this as an opportunity for someone, for students to come constructively learn with us how to work in journalism, and also learn about what we do and the programs that we offer as an experience in writing, in storytelling, in learning, and also having some hands-on real-life experience.
Thank you. My last question is, 9/11 Tribute Center, they've done a lot of work with 9/11 and the victims and everything like that, but they've also reached out to the Pentagon and to the people in Pennsylvania. But one thing I've heard throughout my tours is that you all have done a lot of work with people in Japan. If you could explain how your own experiences have helped people in foreign countries to cope with their losses and natural tragedies or terrorist attacks as well.
So working with the population of victims of terrorism in New York especially, and relevant to 9/11, is a really unique circumstance. However, one of our missions as an organization in supporting victims of terrorism is to find ways that as we recover, we can inspire other communities that may have had some incidents of trauma or tragedy on any level. Whether it's a community that suffered a large fire or any loss of life, basically, whether it's on a small scale or a large scale. We started working internationally with victims groups that were coming here to New York City. And we've also attended and worked with the International Victims of Terrorism Congress, and primarily started in Europe, but also now in South America. As far as how on 9/11 and being a very unique and large-scale event, how the recovery and the rebuilding and the stages of grief and the stages of struggle to rebuild for the survivors can translate into other communities' recovery and provide some sort of inspiration that it doesn't happen overnight. It's painful, it's long, it's hard, and there's a lot of mistakes along the way. You know, there's no prescribed solution when something like this happens, other than the one common denominator we have found of communities and people coming together to support one another. And that whether that's through philanthropic agencies, or whether that is just neighbor to neighbor, or whether that's through religious congregations, or whether that's through just the empathy of people wanting to help other people. Throughout all communities, that's something that when something happens like this that is unprecedented, or that is tragic and takes a long recovery, being inspired by people who have been through it, who can stand with you and stay, that it will take time to rebuild, it will take time to recover, but it will happen and you can get there. Whether that's the loss of a loved one through a drunk driving incident, or I liken a lot of the times to Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, who took something incredibly tragic and created an organization to support one another. It's a very, very similar model to what we've tried to do with other victims of terrorism. Fortunately, there's not a lot of other American incidents that we can sort of form a community from, but we've reached out internationally to countries that deal with terrorism on a daily basis, whether that's Spain, or in Colombia, or in Japan was a natural disaster where we found population of people that were struggling with a long-term recovery. And that's where we started to send some of our docents to share the spirit of renewal and rebuilding and hope, that it does take a while, but you know, they can stand as an inspiration to others, that eventually in time things will get better. They may not be the same, but they will get better. Did that answer your question?
That was perfect.
It was sort of a long-winded workaround.
No, thank you.